Hey, what's up guys? I am making this video about the AEMC PEL 103 meters that we just got. We have a lot of these going in all over the place, and some guys have put them in, some guys haven't. So I thought it would be good if we had a video just kind of showing what is involved in the kit, how to set it up, how to communicate with the computer, and all that good stuff. So first thing we're going to talk about is what should be in your kit. So each one of these meters should have the following. So you need an AC power adapter. This just plugs into the wall, plugs into the bottom of the meter right here. You need a USB to USB 2.0 communication cable. This is going to plug into the computer and then also plug into the meter right here so that you can set the meter up properly later. This is the power supply that is going to be installed on the meter when you have it in the gear. So this is very simple. This power supply just clicks in the top of the meter right here somehow. There you go. That just clicks in right there, plugs into the bottom, and this guy is self-powered up. So when you connect your voltage leads in the top here, this is what's going to be powering up the meter. It doesn't need to be plugged into the wall the entire time. All right. So in addition to that, you have this USB drive. You're going to need this. This USB drive has all of the AEMC files for each different meter. So the PEL meter, and then also the PowerPad 3 meter is on here. Pretty much all of their equipment, their software is on this drive. So before you go out, you need to make sure that you have one of these because otherwise you just won't have the software to be able to connect to the meter. This right here is just a SD card reader, just a USB drive right there, and the SD card on the bottom. You don't necessarily need this out in the field. You're not really going to be using this, but it's just nice to know that it's in your kit if you actually needed it. So these are your voltage leads. So you should have 4 of these guys. Make sure that you have 4 before you go out. You should have 4 alligator clips on them as well. Very simple. These guys just plug right into the top. When this is hooked onto the top of your meter, these guys are just going in the top here, right? So it's very simple. V1, V2, V3, and neutral. All right, next to the CTs. So there's 2 different types of CTs. This is a MA193 CT. All of the CTs are these nice rope style CTs. They're actually Rogowski coils, so they put out a voltage that is proportionate to the current coming through them, and the meter translates that voltage to know what current it is. It's very important to note this. There is an arrow on every one of the CTs. The way that the meter has to be set up, or the way that the meter should be set up, is that the arrow should face towards the load. So whenever you're hooking this up, make sure that that arrow is facing downstream towards the load. All right, each one of these is set up the same. They all have the same arrow on them. Just note that the MA193, it's a smaller rope style CT. So if you're supposed to hook this up on a big piece of bus or something, this isn't going to work very well. This is only like 3 or 4 inches across. These are good up to 3,000 amps according to AEMC's website. So, you know, if you have a service that's a little bit bigger and this can get around all the conductors, this is good up to 3,000 amps. These are the other CTs that we have. These are the A193 CTs. These guys are also, they also have that arrow right there, right? So same thing, make sure that the arrow is always facing down towards the load. These guys are said to be good for up to 10,000 amps. On the little sticker that's on these, on AEMC's website, they say that they're good for 12,000 amps. So if you have a much larger service that you're going to install this on, these are definitely going to be your go-to. If you have bus, like especially if you have an incoming service coming right off a utility, you definitely want to use these guys. These are much bigger, much easier to use, and they're just going to give you a better accuracy. So now you just want to make sure, if you don't have 3 of those in the kit and 3 of these in the kit, it's not that big of a deal. You just want to make sure that if you're going out to install this on like a 100 amp panel, you're fine with just getting away with these. You really don't need those. Of course, if this is the only thing that you have, you can use them. They're good for down to like 1 amp, I think they can measure to. But you just want to make sure that you have the right size CTs for the application that you're going to put them in. So that's pretty much it for what you need in your kit. Let's just talk about the meter real quick. So meter's super easy to use, all right? There's just a couple little features that I want to tell you about. First thing, when you come up to the meter, make sure that you have an SD card in it, all right? SD card's right here in the bottom. You can just check, push that in, the SD card will pop out. There's another way to check to make sure that you got the SD card. I'll show you in a second. So you're gonna power up the meter right here. This is the power button. You just hold this thing for a sec. All right, now that this meter's powered up, let's go over a couple of the features on the front here. Some of these lights are indicative of what's going on with the meter, and they can also tell you if you have an issue with the meter pretty easily. Start with the Bluetooth light. Not super important. I don't connect to this thing via Bluetooth. I always connect to it via the USB drive or the USB cable. If the Bluetooth light is on, just means that it's enabled. If it's flashing, it means that it's enabled and it's transmitting. If it's off, that means Bluetooth has been disabled. Like I said, you really don't have to worry about that one too much. This one right here is the record light, all right? So if this light is flashing once every 5 seconds, that means that this is in standby. It is not recording, all right? This is pretty much the only way of knowing whether this thing is recording or not. Nothing's gonna show up here in the display. It's pretty much all gonna be right here at this light. So you wanna pay close attention to that. So to get this thing into record mode manually, you can hold this button, right? So you hold this until the light comes on, okay? So that light just came on right there. Now it should blink twice quickly within 5 seconds, all right? So when you see it blink twice, that means that you are actively recording, all right? To stop the recording, you do the same thing. Just hold the button until it turns off. Now it should be back to just blinking once, so it's in standby. All right, so the next one is the rotation light. If this light is off when you have everything connected, you're fine, right? If it's off, that means that you're good, you have the right rotation, everything is connected properly, you really don't have to worry about much. If it's on, you might have a little bit of an issue, something might not be connected right, you might have one of your current sensors 180 degrees out, or you potentially have this programmed wrong where you're telling the meter that the CTs are facing the source and not the load, so the meter would, or the CT would be 180 degrees out. So just pay close attention to that. If you're hooked up right, 99% of the time that light will go out. The next one's the overload light. So this overload light actually has a couple different meanings here. So if the overload light goes off, that means that you're good. So if your CTs are hooked up and the overload light is off, that means thumbs up, you're all good. If this light is blinking, it means that you have a CT that is overloaded and there's too much current on it. You're probably not going to see that very often, but it could happen depending on how you have the meter programmed. I'll get into that in a minute. If this light is on solid right now, it means that the CTs are either missing or they're mismatched. And I'll show you what I mean here. So you take the CTs just plug in right at the top, very simple. So I just need to get all 3 of these CTs hooked up and I can show you what's going on. So as you're hooking up the CTs, this meter is actually recognizing what CT is in there and it can read it and figure out exactly which CT you have hooked up. So you don't need to program the CT, the meter automatically knows it. All right, so now you see that the overload light has gone out. That's because all 3 of my CTs are connected and they match. If you have a mismatched CT, like say you have one of these that is a different style, I've seen this, this light right here will be on and it'll kind of look like that. Give it a second here, that light should be back on. All right, so if you have a mismatched CT, all three of your CTs would be connected and that light would be on. Then you would know that you have a problem with your CTs. So I would say before you go out in the field, power this meter up, plug all 3 of your CTs in, make sure that that light goes out. That way you know you're gonna be good when you go to hook this thing up. All right. This next light right here is the SD card. If this light is on and it's green, it means that the card is okay. If you pop this out, I'll show you. So I just popped out the SD card right there. that light change color. If the red light is on, it means that either the card is missing or it's locked. So you might have an issue with the SD card having the lock feature on. All right, if this light is blinking, it means that there might not be enough capacity on the SD card for the meter recording. So I would say if this light is blinking at any time, you're going to want to look at the manual, or you're going to want to look in the computer and figure out how much capacity you actually have on that SD card. These meters don't take up a whole lot of memory, so when you're doing the meter recordings, you really shouldn't have an issue with the SD card filling up. They really don't take up much memory at all. The other one's the battery right here. Battery light, it's just telling you the state of the charge, not really a big deal. This guy right here will light up if you have the power adapter plugged in. So as long as you have power going to this meter, this power light should be on. Same thing if you have this guy right here hooked into the top and then plugged into the bottom, that power light should be on, letting you know that the meter's good and it's powered up. All right, so that's pretty much it for the meter and going over it. If you want, when you're out in the field, you can scroll through all of these different menus. There's all different things in here to look at. This is giving you, your currents. You can scroll down to get voltages. You can do a little bit of the meter setup through this, but it's much more complicated than hooking up to the computer. So like I said, you definitely want to be able to have a laptop out there, hook it up to the computer, and do all of your programming through the computer. It's really not that difficult. I'm going to get into that right now. All right guys, this part of the video is going to show you how to connect to the PEL meter via the laptop. So like I said earlier, you need that USB thumb drive. You're going to download that on your computer. All of these different applications are going to be included in that thumb drive. The one that we're concerned with is the PEL one right here. If you're using the other meter that is replacing the Dranitz meter, it's the larger one called the PowerPad 3, you would use this, but this is the one that you're concerned with, PEL. I've taken this one and I've already put it on my desktop, so I'm just going to go ahead and open it up right from the desktop. All right, so at this point you have the meter powered on. You can have it powered on via the AC adapter, just to the meter. It doesn't have to be hooked up to the gear or anything. But what you're going to do, you're going to hook up your USB connection cable to the bottom of the meter also. You're going to go over to this little icon right here where it says add an instrument. All right, this is going to pop up. You're pretty much just going to follow the prompts, just hit next. It pretty much auto detects the meter and what you need to do. Just click finish when you're done. All right, so this is going to pop up right here in your PEL network. This meter, the last place that it was installed was at KMB 373 East Main Street. So all of this information is still in here from the last time it was installed. So to set this meter up, they're pretty simple. You're going to go right here to this icon where it says modify instrument configuration. All right, I'm going to walk you through each one of these tabs just to make sure that everything is going over. So these meters, you can name them, right? So you just put the name of the customer right here, the location of the meter, so what the street address is, what building, whatever you're putting it in. And also sometimes I'll put the panel in here too, whether it's the main incoming service or a panel up on the rooftop, whatever you can do to just be a little bit more descriptive. You really don't have to worry about this auto power off. That can stay at 10 minutes. Not a big deal there. This button right here, this locks the record button on the front of the meter. So if you came up to the meter and you were trying to turn the meter off, if this is enabled right here, you will not be able to stop the recording via the front of the meter. You would have to use the software to stop it. So I would just keep this unclicked
for right now, not really a big deal. You just use the button to come up and stop the meter when you're done. So all of this should pretty much stay the same. You really don't have to mess with anything in here except the name and the location. You're always going to want to set the clock though. So just make sure that you synchronize it with the PC. It might take a second here, but definitely want to do that. So now it says it differs by 0 seconds. All right. Next one you're going to go to is communication. Don't have to do anything in here. This is for Bluetooth. This is for the USB. It already knows the USB address. And then this is for the Ethernet network if you wanted to have it plugged in. So don't have to touch anything in this one. This is the bread and butter right here. So this is the one that you really want to pay attention to. So I would say 99% of the systems that we're going to have this hooked up in, it's going to be this 3-phase 4-wire Y, and it's kind of showing it to you right here. So if you have a different configuration, not a big deal. You can pretty much select anything in here. I think they have an option for every different application, but 99% of the time we're going to be on this one, 3-phase 4-wire Y. This right here is what you really want to pay attention to. You always want this to have this selected as load. So this is going to be where the arrow on the CT is facing. If you have this at source and it's facing the load, then your CTs are going to be 180 degrees out and it's all going to be jumbled. So always make sure that this is on load. Make sure that the arrow on the CT is also facing the load and you won't have an issue. Down here, there's really not much else that you have to set. These don't even have to touch this. This is if you're using a potential transformer. The frequency, the nominal frequency is always going to be 60 hertz, so you just leave that there. This is what you really want to look at right here also. So this is the current sensors. So it auto detects your current sensor, but it doesn't know the range that it's looking to measure within. So what you really want to do is make sure that you have this on the appropriate range for the piece of equipment. So if you have this on a 1,000 amp bus or a 400 amp panel and you have this selected as 100 amps, it's actually going to overload and your CTs aren't going to read right. And I'll show you a picture of that in a couple minutes. But if there is ever a question, just err on the side of caution. If you have a 1,000 amp panel, put it at 2,000 amps. If you have a 4,000 amp panel, put it at 10,000 amps. That's really the only thing that you need to adjust in here. All right. So the next one, you're going to be into recordings. All right. So up here, it's giving you another place to name your session essentially. So you can just put the same thing that you did in this first one in general, not a big deal. Same thing there. So this is where you're going to start your recordings from. So if you want to record right now, you can hit this record now button. It's going to ask you for the duration that you wanted to record. This is 248 days. You don't really need to do that. Typically, these are only going to be in for about 2 weeks or so you can click 2 weeks. All right. Nothing else here really has to be changed. We're going to keep these at 15 minutes. So this is taking a demand interval snapshot pretty much every 15 minutes. And then at the very end, it kind of puts it all together in its report format. But 15 minutes is fine. So we're going to leave all these at 15 minutes. This down here, this is for harmonics. So if you have this selected, this is recording to the 50th harmonic. I would not recommend putting this in there because it's going to eat up all your data. So just keep this selected right here, the record 1 second trends. That's plenty sufficient. We haven't had an issue so far. This down here is also going to tell you how much space is available in your SD card. You can see this one's got a ton. Pretty much none of this SD card has been used up. And you'll see that after you do your recordings, you're really not using much of this SD card. These meters don't eat up much data at all. So the last part right here is meters. You really don't have to touch anything over in this section. This is just saying it's resetting the energy meter every time you start a new session. I wouldn't even worry about clicking anything off here. All that's good. So when you're ready to start your recording, right, you have this record now button going and you're just going to hit OK. So when I hit OK right now, I'll show you. It might take a second to pop up. It's downloading all of these different settings that we just did into the meter at once, and it's also telling the meter that it's time to start recording. Give this just a second. All right, so now we are recording. What I want you to look at here is this main screen. So this is your meter. This is pretty much telling you everything about your meter. This is very important right here, this current sensor. So when you have the current sensors plugged in, all the current sensors should read the same. So it should say MA193 or A193, depending on the current sensor that you're using. I'm gonna go plug a current sensor in right now just so you can see what it looks like. All right, so you see that just popped up. The meter is very smart. It auto detects what type of current sensor you have, and you don't have to do any programming for the current sensor. It knows what current sensor you're using. The only thing that you had to program was the range that it's supposed to look within. All right, so everything here looks pretty good. It's telling you right here your 3-phase 4-wire Y, your arrow on your CT is facing towards the load. All that's good. So the next thing is going to be what you're actually recording, all right? So this real-time data right here. Okay, so I like to look at this after I hook the meter up. I have everything hooked up, and I want to make sure that what I'm reading is correct. So in here you have RMS. So this is going to tell you your voltages, line to neutral, voltage line to line. These are going to be your currents. You know that you only have 3 current sensors. That neutral current right there is calculated within the meter, so you don't have to worry about hooking up a current sensor on the neutral. This is telling you your harmonic distortion. Don't really have to worry too much about that. Crest factor, this is not really anything super important. Power, this is going to be your KW, your K-bar, and your KVA. So you want to make sure that all of this looks correct before you go walking away from the meter. You're also going to want to look at your power factor too. When you go into this screen, these will have a graph of essentially what you want to look at. You can select different things, voltage, phase to neutral, you know, each different individual component. This one is a good one to look at. This doesn't have anything displayed because I'm not hooked up right now, but I'm about to show you here in a second what you want to look for. So this diagram right here isn't the typical diagram. When you see this current or these vectors, it's actually showing this rolling counterclockwise right here. Or I'm sorry, it's going to be rolling clockwise. So it's going to be going 1, then 2 following it, then 3. Most vector diagrams will be rolling the opposite way, even though it is clockwise. So just pay attention to that. When this is all hooked up right, these will all be checked off. So the current rotation checked off, voltage, and then the power rotation. And you can look and see at this meter right here, I'll show you here in a second, what you should be looking for. All right, so this is one that's hooked up, and it's hooked up correctly. Like I said, everything is rolling in the clockwise rotation. That's why the current right here is lagging behind the voltage. Typically on most other meters, you'll see it down in this area right here because everything's rolling the opposite way, but this one does it a little different. So just pay attention to that. Make sure that your current is, your current for your first phase is next to your voltage for your first phase. Make sure all that looks good before you go walking away. I'm gonna show you another one right here. So this is one that was hooked up. This has the voltage and the currents all being read. Like I said, the neutral right here is calculated current. All of that looked good. It's going to tell you also whether your load is inductive or capacitive. So if you have a lagging power factor, you're going to have an inductive load, and it'll show you that right here. It's going to tell you what your power factor is. You can do all of your calculations right here just to make sure that your meter is hooked up correctly. All right, so there was one other thing. Okay, so this is one that was hooked up and the wrong CT was installed. So even though the CT looked correct, See how this current sensor 1 has a 193, and these two are different. So on this particular one, the overload light was on and the current was not reading properly. Even though there was about 600 and something amps running through the panel, the meter was only showing about 45 amps. So definitely make sure that you have your current sensors hooked up correctly. Make sure they are all reading the same, and you won't have many issues. The other thing that I would recommend is that when you are going out on one of these jobs, you take a fluke meter and also a CT, an amp clamp with you. You're probably going to want to read the amperage just to know beforehand what you're getting into, so that you know when you have your meter hooked up that you're reading the right stuff. So that's definitely good to know. So this, when we are recording, you will see this right here, this recording status active, right? Whenever you see this active, you know that you're recording. It's also telling you right here that your SD card, you're greater than 4 weeks recording time. So you can let this thing rip for a pretty good amount of time without having to worry about the memory filling up. If you guys have any questions about any of this stuff, feel free to reach out to me. I've done a couple of these so far, and they've gone all right, but I can always learn something. So if you have any issues or questions, just reach out, give me a shout, and I'll try to help you as much as I can. Thanks.